Okay, so look, good morning to you both. And today's session, we're going to be having a look at two of CSU's online engagement tools. It's important to state from the outset that when I run these sessions, I need to make a distinction between tools that are supported so that we have an enterprise license for all staff to use at the uni, and that if you have a problem with them, you can reach out and get help with them. And both of these tools fall into that category. And the multitude of others that I quite often get asked about, things like Kahoot and WooClap and Poll Everywhere, and there are many, many, many different types of audience engagement tools around and available. But apart from Padlet, which we look at in a different session, the collaborative tools session, Mentimeter and Zoom represent two of the only supported in-house tools that we have, where you can get the full functionality, the full licensing. They integrate with our other systems and logins, and they're supported if you have hassles with them. So it's important to stipulate that. As with any of the sessions I run, there isn't a set formality as such. If you've got questions at any time, either drop them in the chat, or you can raise your hand, or you can just come off mute and pull me up. I'm not precious about any of that. Otherwise, I'll stop periodically to check in and see that everyone is still with me. And good morning, Ruth, to you as well.
Morning, Lachlan, and everyone.
All right, so let's get into what we're talking about here. We're not talking about Padlet today, as I mentioned. I need to take it off that slide deck. We talk about it in next week's session, which is on collaborative workspace tools. But other than that, we're going to have a look at Mentimeter and Zoom polls and how to use them. We'll see how we go time-wise if we get into teaching ideas and things. But I like to provide a little bit of context in and around online audience engagement. When we talk about these tools particularly, we usually have people coming with different needs in mind, but most often it's about ways to get the audience involved, and moving away from quite sort of didactic, passive teaching approaches, in online spaces. So you want the audience to have opportunities to get involved. Sometimes people overtly find ways to do that by stopping and putting an activity in front of students. Other times there are activity types that maybe sit on the side that they can still get involved with, but there's still ways of making the online experience interactive. It's also a good way to get ideas, opinions, and feedback. I'm not sure if it makes participants feel valued, but it certainly has a better chance of making them feel included, and getting their ideas shared into the common space. Alternate ways of participating if you're running things concurrently. Zoom's an interesting example of that, obviously, when we have people using the chat or reactions or back channeling, or if we've got Q&A happening and other things whilst someone is presenting, or if you have a co-host, sometimes having multiple channels allowing for different forms of engagement can be really useful. And a distinction what we'll make today looking at these two tools is their ability to be used, particularly Mentimeter, asynchronously. So not only can we use them with a live audience on the spot and getting feedback and buy-in at the same time, but we can also have them embedded and running by themselves indefinitely. Now, whether you want them in your subject sites for students to participate with, or you're just providing links to your audience, etc., Mentimeter allows you to do both. And we'll have a look at how that works, how we make it run. I am going to share the quick guide for Mentimeter in the chat for you. If you're more interested in looking at the document and having a play for yourself rather than what I'm talking about, please feel free to do so. That's there for you, and I'll share it again when we get to the end of the session. All right, let's get into Mentimeter. I'm not going to be running too many more slides for you. I'd rather get into the tool set itself and show you how they work. Mentimeter is accessed through the website mentimeter.com. And when you get to mentimeter.com, you'll have a button that says login and sign in the top right-hand corner. It's important to note, I'll just log out of mine so you can see the same option. Log in or sign up. This is available to all CSU staff by clicking on login or sign up, both will have the same result because it relies on you choosing single sign-on. Look for SSO. As long as you click on single sign-on, it will take your CSU login, as long as you put in Charles Sturt University as the organization that you work for. And then it will look for your CSU sign-in if you haven't already signed into your computer that day, bringing you into the Mentimeter backend. Now, you have the opportunity under the My Presentations area on the left there to organize folders for your collections to help get organized. You'll see I haven't done that particularly well in here. There are many, many folders, but it's certainly there to help you be a bit more organized. Otherwise, you can click on New Presentation and start building straight away. There is a feature called Shared Presentations at the top. Now, I'll get into that in a second, but the most important distinction between the two is if you're inside the Shared Presentations area, see which one's blue, any activity that you create in here will be shared in a common space. Now, some people really want that if they're working within faculty teams or school teams or groups of people wanting to share their activities all in the same area. Using the Shared Presentations area is great. No folders, though, for organizing, which means you could be looking through a decent sized collection of things to try and find yours. You can search for them, but it is a collaborative shared storage space for Mentimeter. So just make sure you're aware which area you're in when you're actually creating. By default, it should be My Presentations. So only you can see them to begin with when you create a Menti activity. All right, let's get into how we build in Mentimeter. It is a matter of clicking on New Presentation. And the language that we're dealing with within this tool, because it's a presentation tool, is presentation. Within a presentation, it has slides like PowerPoint. Within each slide, you have activities potentially. So you can use this tool, if we look further down here, to add content types. If you're looking for an alternative to PowerPoint, you can certainly do that. But most people are here for the interactive activities, and that's what we're building today. So each of the activity types that we look at, you can have one per slide. So you've got your presentation. It might just have the one slide with the one activity, or you might have multiple slides with multiple activities. So we're going to make our first activity on our first slide, and I'm going to go for something basic. Let's go with a word cloud. This one's quite popular. We've gone straight into the Builder window, and it's live already, hence why we're getting this kind of dialogue here about waiting for responses. This activity is actually already in existence, and now we can put in our prompt under our question area. How are we all feeling today, for example? How many entries do I want people to put in? Well, this time around, I'm going to limit you all to 2 responses. But if you want to put things in as many times as you want, I'm going to turn on multiple submissions. And if I wanted a picture to sit behind it, I could add one here. But right now, that activity is created and ready to use. And the way that we share Mentimeter activities is really simple. We go up to Share, up the top here. And there's 2 areas I want you to look at, one of them being the Participation tab, which will give us a link to have participants involved. If I copy that, I can share that immediately in Zoom or wherever else, and you're able to click on that link and start putting in your responses. The other ways of participating include getting a code, which people would be able to put in by going to Mentimeter themselves. I'll show you how that works in just a second. You can also get a QR code if you want that up on a screen for people to be able to start scanning. And I can see in the background, people are already putting responses in, so it's pretty easy to use. That's our participation information. What we want to look at as the presenter is also seeing what those results look like on the live web page. So link to the live results, I'm going to copy that. And if I just put that into a different browser window, we get a tab with our word cloud updating on the spot, live and synchronous. And Down the bottom right-hand corner, I can see how many people have engaged with the activity. And up the top here, you'll see that by default, there are the instructions with that access code that we talked about. Now you can toggle these off if you like, or if you don't mind, you can also leave that there. Usually for myself, I provide people with the link when I want them to do the activity. That's how I usually share these in Zoom, in the chat. Here's the link, go for it and use it. So that's my live kind of use case for the activity. You'll see that it's also collated the responses. So that activity stays active indefinitely, unless I stop it in the back end. If I look at this, go back into my actual build window, I can actually stop people participating in this activity. But before I move to a different section of this, I just want to point out that you can see now, because there are results already in the word cloud, I can click on either view results or manage results, and it will allow me to reset the slide and clear all the votes that have gone in. So that's where that kind of control for the activity exists. So if I was going to reset it either for the entire presentation, keeping in mind that the entire presentation right now is one slide, I can reset the results, and you'll see that those words are gone and the activity is ready to use again. So it's still live, still ready to be used, but we've just cleared the results. If, on the other hand, I wanted to add another activity, you can also put in a name up the top here. If I add in another slide and another activity type, we might go for something like a basic multiple choice. You'll see it's added in a subsequent slide down here. On the left, we can put in those choices here. Again, what's my prompt, my question? Favorite weather. And if we go for sunny, raining, foggy, you'll see next to each of those choices, there is an icon for adding an image. So you can also have an image that sits on top of each of the multiple choice options, make it a little bit more visual. You can do that. You can also have the opportunity to make it more quiz-like by having an actual correct response. If you toggle that on, it'll ask you to select one of these as the correct response. And again, you can allow people to choose multiple options if you want to. So it's pretty straightforward. The build interface is really, really simple. As soon as you start building it, it's already live. And this will be using the same link that we had before for that other activity. But what I want to point out here is that when you have multiple slides within your Menti presentation, you have to be conscious of the fact that as the presenter, you have control over the pacing of this activity. So what I mean by that is, even if I was to share that same participant link with you again in the chat, you've already got it there from before. It's the same link. If you click on that, and if I was to go to that myself, that same link, it's moved through to the next slide, allowing you to participate and submit your responses. But that is because, and you'll see here our live window of the live results has moved here. But the reason that that has happened is because we are currently on the second slide in the back end here, right? So the presenter has control over that. If I haven't selected that at that point, people are still going to be stuck on the first activity. So this is sometimes the thing that people have going on with Mentimeter as presenters. It requires the presenter to progress the activity. Now, the workaround for this is very simple. You need to go to the settings for your presentation. And the very first thing we look at here is the presentation pace. Now, I would always recommend that you switch from presenter pace, which relies on you to move something forward, to audience pace. If it's on audience pace, then that means you don't have to worry about it. They can actually just go through, answer questions when they're ready to, go to the first one, go to the second one. and you don't have to worry about them being stuck on one activity or another. This is just some feedback I've had on Mentimeter at times when people have made plenty of activities, but the participants aren't able to do anything apart from the first slide. It's all to do with this presentation pace setting. If you want to control whether they can do one activity and then wait for you to progress to the next one and the next one, then by all means use the presenter pace. But otherwise, multiple activities, go to your settings and switch to audience pace. Does that make sense? Okay. I'll stop there for a second. Has anyone got any burning questions at this point before I keep going? All good? Okay. What I want to show you at this point as well is how we take our Mentimeter activity and make it asynchronous, how we use it and leave it for our participants to engage in our subject sites, for example. Remembering that the pieces of information that we need to do this are the link to join, and in the presentation sharing tab, there is an option here to copy the live results. So, sorry, to embed the live results. If I click on that, it's copied the embed code into my clipboard somewhere. And now if I was to go into one of my I2 subject sites, for example, any content area, build an item. I'll call it Menti activity. Now I'm just going to leave a space at the top there. But if I now turn on the code view in the widget over here with the two arrows, I can hit Control V, which will paste that embed code that I just got. You can watch this in the recording as well if you need to go back. If I hit save, it's now embedded the Mentimeter activity underneath. We'll have a look at it in a second, but you can see it's populating there. That's going to sit there ready to go. And our participants, they have some instruction here, but what I want to give them in this top line is the link, okay? To vote in this activity, click here. Now what I need is the link for them to click on. And if I look at Menti, under the participation tab is that voting link. I can copy that and just put it here. So there's the link and there's what it looks like once people vote. If I submit now, keeping in mind it's going to put it right to the bottom of the page. Here's my Menti activity in my subject site ready to go. And if a participant comes in, clicks on the link, how am I feeling? Amazing. Great. Submit. If I go back here to my subject site, you'll see that those responses that I've put in have updated in real time. So the activity now just exists asynchronously for students to engage with. You don't need to be there. You don't need to be in a live presentation, etc. You can make activities that sit there for your audience to participate with. You just need those two pieces of information, the voting link and the embed code to drop it into your subject site. And that way you can use the tool either when you want to run live activities, or if you would also like it to sit asynchronously. Okay, what I want to give you some exposure to is the different activity types in Menti. So what I'm going to do is give you a few different activity links for you to vote in, and you can see what they look like. So I'll just close a few tabs. Let's see, what can I give you? Let's go for... I've got plenty of them. Menti PD. Here we go. Let's try that one. If I go into that activity, is that the one I want? That one looks pretty good. All right, so I'll grab the slides. I'm going to grab my link for my participants. I'll put this in the chat for you. And Asim, you're absolutely right. In the case where you don't have people coming to the live meetings, you're able to run these asynchronously for people to participate with. So you can go into that link and start voting in those activities. Before I look at my output window for my activities, I'm going to check in the settings that audience pace is selected, so you can work through them if you need to. And now I'm going to get my output, what it actually looks like while you're voting. Presentation live results. So now I can have a look at what it looks like in here with my audience as the results start coming in. Okay. And obviously I've used this previously and I haven't cleared the results because we don't have 18 people in here, that's for sure. But you can see people are voting. Those results are going up and down. And if I move through to subsequent activities down the bottom left here, I can move to the next one. This was an activity type to do with Pop Divas. Remember I was talking about adding the image above multiple choice? That's what it ends up looking like. An image on top of each option, a bit more visual, colorful, more engaging, etc. And as people vote, you can see things going up and down. So there's almost a competitive element introduced there at that point. And if I go to subsequent activity types, this one is a word cloud. And similarly, when people vote this time round, I've added an image to the word cloud and you can see it's updating on the spot, reorienting. And there's an image as a prompt or a visual stimulus on the right-hand side there. So that's the word cloud activity type. And then I'll move through to another activity type. This time we have a traffic light activity, which can be used to different effect. You have your prompt question and then your responses that you have next to your red, amber, green, etc. And this might be the last one. This one is a scale activity that basically allows you to configure. I'll show you the settings for the scale activity in a second because I quite enjoy building these particular activities because it allows people to move their own sort of responses along a continuum, showing you the average responses, etc., but reorganizing priorities. And then you can also see where the averages are. Everything you can see in this activity slide is customizable. What I mean by that is the language that's here. You don't have one end of the continuum that always says to a lesser or greater extent or whatever. You can customize the language that's used here, all the midpoints, each of the prompt types. You probably don't want to go beyond 8 or 9 different options within this type of activity because it blows out the space on the screen. You just can't see them properly anymore. And then that's the end of my activities that I put into that one presentation. Now, if we have a look, I built a presentation there that had 5 slides with 5 activities on it. I could have just as easily built 5 different presentations with one activity in each and had a different link for each and just shared it when I was ready with the audience. You don't have to build them all into a single presentation and have people progress through activities. You can just build one and use that when you want to. Carolyn, sorry, I'm just looking at your questions. Are visuals in activities only visible to students when the results are given? No, they're always visible. It's a good question. They had an option previously. I think if we build a new activity, for example, with a word cloud and add in an image, the image is now when you have them, will sit along the right-hand side like we saw a minute ago. The way that they used to behave is they operated almost as a reveal. So the image would sit there first and you couldn't see the results until you as the host was ready to remove the image in a reveal and then show the results. They got rid of that. I think they probably thought it was either a bit gimmicky or confusing or not that helpful. Now, if you add an image, it sits there next to the activity. Now, I mentioned the scales activity. If we were to build, and you can see over here on the right-hand side in the build pane where it says content, slide type is activity type. If I go and find the scales activity from here, you can see by default, you've got the name of the activity scales, which we can change to whatever you want. We've got the continuum that we have from one end to the other, which we can change to, let's see. If we add a statement and say, thing one, thing two, okay, you'll see that it's going in there. Do we want to show averages? No, I won't, but underneath at the bottom where it says dimensions. There we go. Now here are our values. Strongly disagree on the left, which I can change to how I feel one end and then the other end over here. So you can define what your continuum looks like. And then you can also determine whether or not you want to see any of the values in between. So by default, this activity has 5 points along the continuum. You can add more. If you want to add 8, for example, 6, 7, and then you can also label all of the interim label points in between if you want to. Can get a little bit crowded in there, but certainly it's customizable if you want that. So look, in the quick guide that I provide you, there is a breakdown on most of the activity types available with Mentimeter. So I would really encourage you to have a play with it. I'm going to finish on Menti with a new activity type that they have added, which might be familiar to some of you if you've played around with other tools before, which I only just discovered this morning. You always find something new in here. But if I can grab the link, I only just did it this morning. It organizes the folders first and then the files if they don't have a folder underneath. So I need to get this one. There it is. When you also have this back-end view of all your activities, you can go across to the right, click on the dots, and you can get a shortcut to some of the information you might want without opening the build window. So for example, the share option, which gives us that window with our share information, you can get straight to it without opening up the build link. So I'm going to copy that link for you here. I am going to grab the output window as well. I might open that presentation link just to see what it looks like. In this activity type, it's saying that it's not open. Okay, I've got to wait for the presenter to open it. Good point. I'm happy to do that. Let's do so. Presentation link. Let's try that. Okay. Now, potentially, we have 3 players ready to go. If you've got volume happening in your quiz, you're going to hear something in just a second. And I hit enter to start the quiz. And now you're going to be prompted on your screen with the first question type. Here we go. Can we hear some music going? No? Didn't do that very well. So it has a countdown, 15 seconds. We've got some activities. We've got some responses. Someone's selected. Then when we're ready, we can move to the next. We get a leaderboard and we can see how people are going. Who's in front, who's less in front. You get bonus points for answering more quickly, for example. And then we're ready for the next question this time round. Here come our players. Question 2 is about to start. Hit enter. And here we go. We get 15 seconds. 4 people have voted. And then we get our results coming in. And of course, don't take my word for it. Of course, everyone has their own opinions on this. But you can see now, if I progress through to the end, we also get our leaderboard updating on the spot. And then it'll give us a breakdown, and you can add in as many of those question types into the quiz as you like. So what I'm getting at here is, it only had 15 seconds, I seem as well on this, but you can change the timer so that it has longer. This quiz activity basically looks like it's got most of its ideas straight from Kahoot. If you're familiar with Kahoot, the idea of a leaderboard with question types, poll everywhere is quite similar as well. But if we have a look, that's the end of that particular presentation. If we have a look at the quiz tool options, it is under, if I have a look and build a new one, quiz competition, and then you've got the first option was the one we were playing with, select answer. So it has multiple choice questions. As soon as you click on it, it adds in a leaderboard option as the second slide. The first one is your multiple choice question. So you have to actually put your question in here, put in your answers to it, answer 1, answer 2, etc., etc. But you also have to click which one is correct. How many seconds do they have to answer? So that's where you got your 15 seconds from, Asim. We can change that to 30, 40, whatever. And there's an option here that faster responses get more points. And you can toggle the leaderboard if you like. But what I was getting at down the bottom is there should have been music, which would sound like. I feel like all of them belong on the Benny Hill show, but maybe that's just my age. All right. So that's how we put together a competitive quiz type activity in Mentimeter. It's going to be a little fiddly for you to set up, but the end result I think might be quite enjoyable if you want to put the time into that. But I don't know that I'd be doing it with 2 participants, Asim. That might not be a just reward for your time. All right, so that's Mentimeter in a nutshell. It really is a tool that rewards the time that you put into playing around with the different activity types. I haven't seen many people use it for presentations as such. They use it mostly for the interactive activities. And again, running them live in your Zoom meetings the way that we have, or you embedding them asynchronously in your subject sites to run. Both are perfectly viable options. So do have a look. And if you want them to be usable by others in your group, you can just build them within the shared presentations area. Yeah, asynchronously create 1 presentation per activity would be my advice, Leanne. Absolutely. Otherwise, they'd need to progress through to each link and each activity, and that would just get fiddly. So if you're going to make one to run without a live presenter, just use 1 slide in your presentation with 1 activity. That's exactly right. Okay. Have we got any questions or thoughts around Menti at this point before I get into Zoom polls?
Lachlan, I
Karen,
was just going to ask about announcements. Can you put them in? I don't know if you would want to, but I'm just thinking outside the square a little bit. If you could, do you think there's an opportunity to do that?
absolutely.
Okay.
You could put the link for voting straight into the announcements.
Yeah.
If I was being sneaky, I'd also tell students to log into the subject site to a particular area to see the results. So they get the announcement, the email, and they vote. And then potentially we can also get them to jump into the part of your site, for example, that you want them to look at to see the results.
Okay.
Otherwise, you could also just put the link to the results in the announcement as well. Click here to vote and click here to see the results. You could do that as well. You can put embed code into an announcement, but I don't know if it displays properly when people get the email. That's the question. In the subject site, in the announcements area, it will display the embedded activity, no problem in Blackboard.
Yep.
But the way that the Blackboard announcement tool sends through email information is quite picky. It's a little bit fiddly. Like when you try and embed images in there, they don't always show up in the emails that the students receive. So the link we know will work. That'll come through to them in the email for them to vote, etc. But I don't know about embedding. So the way that I embedded the activity in that subject site earlier.
Thank you for that.
Like that, yeah. So it might be something to, I'll have a look into it and get back to you. Because I'm curious as well whether or not embed code flows through in an announcement. Not that we'll have Blackboard for too much longer, but anyway, something to think about. Okay, let's have a look at Zoom polls. Now, when we have polling in Zoom, I'm going to bring across my Zoom interface here as a host. So I can see all of you here in my gallery view. I can see the chat over here. But as the host, I can see the polling option down here in my taskbar. And polling requires either that you have created the polls in advance, or if you click on the polls button as a host, you are able to click on plus and create polls on the spot. If you have one ready to go, which I have here, you can, as the host, click on launch. And that's going to have the poll coming up for each of you to answer. We have 2 questions there that will allow you as participants to vote. I can see a timer against each activity. And it will also show me how many of the 6 participants in the meeting have engaged in the activity. You'll see that it's updating on the spot. And those results are coming in. But you need to keep in mind that the participants can't see this the way you are. I'm sharing my screen at the moment as a host, right? So that you can see what it looks like for a host. But the participants are not going to be able to see this straight away. There's something we need to do when we end the poll for them to see the results. Alternatively, you can just share your screen like I'm doing and show them what that's looking like. But we can see 100% of the participants have answered. The results are there for the host. You've also all answered the second one. And if I now click on end poll, I have the option to share the results, right? At that point, it's made available to the participants. I might stop sharing my screen for a second so you can see what that looks like. Share screen, share screen, share screen. Okay, so at the moment, we're in the Zoom room. You should be able to see the shared Zoom poll results in your room. Can you see those? Yep. And so it gives you that breakdown of how the activity went. And what we had with those poll, we had a single choice, multiple choice question. And in the second activity type we had was a multiple answer type question, which allowed you to select multiple options. Okay. If I stop sharing this, I'm going to share my screen again. And we'll look at the difference between the two. When we run our polls, or if I add a new poll in the back end, That one will sit there. I can reuse that poll again later on if I want to, but you need to know that polls exist in Zoom at the meeting level. They don't follow you around as a host, allowing you to use them in other meetings you run. The poll is attached to this meeting, this Zoom meeting. So if you have a recurring Zoom meeting, like most academics set up for their lectures each week, for example, a recurring Zoom meeting, you'll be able to keep using the same polls that you have every time you use that meeting because it's attached to that particular Zoom room. But if you as a host create another Zoom meeting for something else, your polls won't be there for you. They are attached at the meeting level. Again, we're in a live Zoom meeting here now. If I want to add another poll, I can click on plus and it will open the dialog for me to be able to create new polls in the live meeting. Now, most of you are not going to put the time into being in a live meeting with students and then creating polls on the spot. That just seems like time kind of lost, but I'm just showing you how to do it before we look at the back end. If I click on polls here and click next, I can choose what we have here with an untitled question, but my choices there are single or multiple choice. So that's where we get those two different types of questions that you answered in the polling activity. When Zoom says single choice, that's what we would call multiple choice. You get one answer, but you choose from different options. The second one that says multiple choice is what we would call multiple answer, because when people allows people to choose more than one response. So the language is a little bit confusing, but all you do is put in the question in there, and you can then add in subsequent questions underneath. What I'd like to point out from the simple activity types in Zoom polls is there is an option in here, if I can drag this out a little, for you to create breakout rooms based on the responses. So what that means is that once you get the results in from people choosing things, it will then organize breakout rooms for your participants based on their answers. So at a very superficial level, if I was to turn this around and say, which room do you want to be in? And then chose room 1, room 2, room 3, and then save this, you'll notice that I should only really be able to use single choice for this, but because it's going to add the participants to those rooms. If I save this, and then I'll get rid of that first activity type, actually. Let me just, this is the one I want to show you. Which room do you want to be in? Single choice. Save that. Should have saved. It did save. Okay. Hang on. If I now click on polls again and run that activity, I'll show you how to get the results, Ruth, for the polls in just a second. Just seems to be quite slow in getting to these sections. Why are you not loading? Polls, anytime now. No, it's not going to work. Okay, let me show you the back end instead. We can get to the same area. So we looked at how to create polls in the meeting itself. In the back end of Zoom, if I've gone to the Zoom portal at charlessturt.zoom.us and signed in, find the meeting that you're using. So I'm assuming that you've created the meeting in advance. Find the meeting that we're talking about. So this is today's session, online engagement. If I click on that meeting, the option to add polls is up here at the top, where you can see the tab that says polls and quizzes. And you'll see that you can create new polls and have them waiting in your room when you go into it live, ready to use. And you'll also see the pre-existing ones. So if I click on create, again, I get those options for simple polls or advanced polls. and they will be ready for us to use the next time we run the meeting. I'm going to show you what the advanced question types look like. And we'll see now that those choices that we're talking about are a little bit more obvious. You can decide whether or not the questions are mandatory. You can show how you display the answers with a drop down or not. You can also choose if breakout rooms are created based on the response. And they've also added in the ability to have an image. That's a new feature with the polls. But the activity types for advanced are different. Apart from single and multiple choice, we also have a matching activity, which effectively will allow you to pair from one side to the other. We have a ranking activity where it'll ask the students to prioritize what order of things they particularly want. Most appealing, based on the feedback I've had from instructors, is the ability to have open response. When you have questions in a poll where you want to see people being able to type in what they think about things, we have the option now to put in short and long answer responses. So I'll make one of those so we can see what it looks like. If we go with short answer, for example, you can see we get up to 200 characters. Let's put in a question here. Hang on. In one sentence, describe the weather outside. Okay, I'm going to make it mandatory. Let's upload an image just for giggles. Do I have any images? Sure, why not? There will be no relationship between the James Bond pictures on the screen and the question, but never mind. Save. So that poll's been added in the back end. If I now go back to my room with you guys with our live meeting and click on polls, of course, it's not going to work. Give me one moment, please. I'm going to nominate Leanne as a co-host for just a second. Because I'm going to leave the meeting. Okay, I'm going to rejoin in just a second so I can show you that polling activity. And for those watching the recording, this is where the recording is going to end. My apologies. If I hit end, leave the meeting, I'm assigning it to okay, I've reclaimed the host rights. Thanks, Leanne. You did a great job. And if I share my screen again, I think for whatever reason, that polling activity just kind of got jammed for some reason. All right, now, if I look at my polls now, there they are. Now it's working. And God, what did I call that poll? Let's see if it's this one down the bottom. It is. I can now launch that poll. And that will now give you the opportunity to type in your short response polls, your responses. So open response is one of those areas that people really wanted to be able to get in Zoom for polling types, rather than just simple multiple choice type questions. I can see that all three of you have put in a response as the host. 3 out of 3 have answered. If I click on end, I have the option again to share the results, or I can click on view details, which will open it in another window. Let's have a look at what that looks like. It shows me the responses underneath in the back end of Zoom. So again, your participants won't see that, but if we're back in our Zoom meeting, me clicking on share results should then show you what those answers look like. Okay, can you see those on your screen? I'll stop sharing mine. Might make it a little bit less difficult to spot. Okay, can you see those responses from everybody? Okay, great. Leanne says you can only see your answer. Now that is very interesting information. So sharing the results for the open response will only display your response. That is very interesting. I didn't know that. So I guess the lesson that we have from this is that if I share my screen again, if we want the students to be able to see the results, yep, thank you very much, Carolyn. That's excellent. Good to know that you can look at the results. What have we got here? There's an option down the bottom. You can see, Ruth, there's an option to download the results directly in the meeting. And you can also get your poll results from the back end. Or we have that that option to look at the results in the browser. So if we were going to look at them all in the one space, where's that browser window gone? It's hiding. There it is. Okay, we have the option to then show the shared poll results, the short answer responses in a browser window like this. So that's how that displays. So I am aware that we are almost at time. I'm going to stop sharing the screen a second. What do we think about Zoom polls? Anybody come off mute? Tell me what you think.
Lachlan, I think I'm more comfortable with Zoom polls now rather than Menti.
Yep.
Like, for example, if I have a set of questions to ask my participants, I could go ahead, prepare the questions, and then when I'm actually running the meeting in the Zoom, I can easily pop those questions in. So that kind of makes it easier for me, and the participants can then answer it as we go along. So that's just my view.
Look, I'm going to say straight away, I agree with you in terms of that. If you've prepared them in advance, and particularly if you're using them in that kind of recurring meeting setting, like the same lecture that you have over a session with students, I think it's a great option. They're pre-prepared, they're on hand, they're ready to go. You don't need to go looking for a share link and an output link and all that kind of stuff. And I'm saying that as someone who loves Mentimeter and is really, really comfortable using it. I can see the appeal of the Zoom polls when they're sitting there in a bank attached to the meeting ready for me to use. I do like that. Yeah. What does everybody else think?
Yeah, I thought it was good and valuable tool to include in your Zoom meetings.
I think the versatility of it has improved as well. Initially, we only had the simple question types in the polls and nothing else, and it was pretty kind of bland. But they seem to be iterating with it, which is nice, adding a few more things to it. I still don't think it's quite there yet in terms of the versatility of the activity types that we get with Menti. But Catherine, I saw you coming off mute there. What have you got to say?
I thought that they were both interesting tools and would have their purpose in different settings. So it's good to be across both. I think I may end up a little more comfortable with the polls, but we'll see.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's pretty easy for me to come out and say, oh, Mentimeter is so easy and easy to use, and you just need this link and this tab and this link and this output window and this code and this thing. But that's only from obviously repetitive use. It's like muscle memory now, something like that. But I do love the versatility of Mentimeter in terms of being able to use it asynchronously. And being able to create interactive activity types that keep just updating on the spot for a group of people, like the word cloud, like the scales and the ratings activities, is really appealing. But you've got to actually put the time into building the activities and all that kind of stuff. So I absolutely get where everybody's coming from. And I think unless anyone has any kind of outstanding questions about any of the tools, I'm happy to give you all a 4-minute early mark this morning and make the most of this beautiful weather we're getting. I don't know if you're getting it where you are, but it's Bathurst and winter. So sun is a really nice thing. So thank you all and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, folks.
Lachlan, you-
You got a question?
yeah, are you able to just quickly help me with my questions
Absolutely.
using